The last time we hung out in this podcast, aka last episode, I talked about how when you know, but you just don't know how you can do a review process to start to open up your connection to your five senses so you can start to see, hear, feel, taste, or smell the intuitive messages that are coming through. And after I finished that episode, I thought to myself, I really want to elaborate on how people's intuition comes through these senses. I want to elaborate because there's a misconception out there. For many of us, there's a misconception on how intuition comes through and how somebody experiences it. So I want to squish that misconception and I want to set you up for success with your own intuition. So we can lightly consider this a part two. We can lightly consider this a part two. I just wanted to elaborate. You know me, I got more to say. As a teacher who's your biggest intuitive cheerleader for your intuition, I just think of things and say, ooh, this would be very helpful, I think. And this is kind of one of those sessions. So if you're new, I always like to welcome people to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Isabeau. It's nice to meet you. If you've been around for a while, I think you're going to like this one because it's going to help you to either open up that first sense that you've been wanting to, or even add to the senses that are already open for you. Either way, we are raising the vibration around intuition. I am doing my best to get the word out to help people know that you are intuitive. Everyone is intuitive. And when you open your intuition, it absolutely improves your life. So if you can, do me a quick favor, hit whatever that is that you hit, the subscribe, the follow, the like, the share, whatever that is. And it'll help the channel out big time. It'll mean a lot to me. So let's jump in. When we are using our intuition, here's the misconception. We're going to dive straight into this. The misconception, which is nobody's fault, and I can tell you how it happens too, is that an intuitive, whether they're psychic or medium, will see things a particular way or hear things a particular way. Mostly the misconception is that they see crystal clear or they hear perfectly, as if it's a person in the room, or as if they're watching a movie screen, or if a spirit is showing up for a medium, for example, it's as if it's the person in living color. And this just isn't true. While this may be true in some exceptions, and we're going to talk about that today, and it's also true for a very small percentage of intuitives, the majority of us, and I'm putting me in the majority, we don't see like that. Our intuitive eyes don't see the way our human eyes do. Our intuitive ears don't hear the way our human ears do. And once we can get that knowledge under our belt and we can drop the bar that we've set for ourselves because we've heard this from others and we've automatically assumed it's that way, then we can realize we've probably been seeing, hearing, feeling, or in the love of the five senses, tasting or smelling. We've been doing that all along. We just didn't know it. So let's jump into this. The misconception comes from, and it's innocently the way it happens, but when an intuitive shares, oh, I'm seeing this or I'm seeing that. I see a loved one come through. I believe she's your aunt. She's got long dark hair. She's wearing a floral dress. That will make you feel like I'm literally looking at an in living color person standing in front of me. And a more accurate description, if a medium used a more accurate description, would be the vague vibration that's coming in is slightly coming into form just enough to tell my knowing and let me know that she has brown hair. Now that I've said that out loud, the hair grows a little bit longer. It's kind of like an intuitive statement to say, yes, but my hair was longer. And now that I've said that, I'm seeing these vague shapes of flowers that are floating around, and now they're forming into the shape of her dress that she's wearing. That would be a more accurate description of how a medium sees. It just takes a long time, and it would be a whole lot easier to say, I think your aunt's coming through. She had long brown hair and a floral dress. You get more done in a shorter period of time when you speak like that. And again, nobody's fault. It's just, that's how we describe things. Same with, oh, I'm hearing somebody say this, this, and this. If we dig down today into what might be the case for you, for your senses, it's going to drop that bar and allow you to start to go, whoa, I am hearing, I am seeing. I didn't know that because I was waiting for something bigger. You need to get the small one in there. And here's why it's not a leveling thing. It's not if somebody sees more clearly, they're stronger. Let's get specific. If somebody sees something more sharply or vivid in color or more clearly, they're not more accurate than somebody that doesn't see things that clearly. The accuracy doesn't come from the strength of your sight or your intuitive sight, the strength of your intuitive sound. It comes from you knowing how your intuition is wired and knowing when you're in and when you're not in. It comes from knowing that, yeah, I really did see that floral dress. That was my intuition. I didn't make it up. That's where the accuracy comes. It's not about how well you see. It's about how much you know when you're linked in to your intuition. If you know you're in, you'll get high accuracy. If you know when you're out, you're also going to get high accuracy because you won't say the thing because you know you're out. You know you're not tapped in. You can feel it. This is why it's really important to not only practice intuitive exercises and such, but pay attention to when you're in and when you're out. Start to get a feeling of what does it feel like to be really linked into my intuition and what does it feel like to not be linked in? Because you're going to toggle in and out. That's the natural process of intuition. And if you know when you're in, that's where the accuracy is. How you see, feel, and hear has nothing to do with your accuracy. That's a very human concept. And if I can see more clearly, I'm better at seeing. No, because that person who can see that clearly can also probably imagine that clearly. This accuracy comes from the skill of knowing the difference between intuition and imagination, not from how clearly you can see things, because chances are very, very good. How you see things How you see things with your imagination is how you will see things intuitively. So that brings me into saying, okay, well, that doesn't give me hope though, because when I imagine something, I barely see something. All right, we're going to start with vision because that's my strongest strength and I can speak to it very well. Then I will talk about hearing and feeling. I will share with you how I see. If I'm getting a psychic hit, a piece of information from source, let's say source is trying to tell me the word apple. And for me, I will see an apple, but I want you to imagine a room, and in the middle of the room is a table, and on the table is the apple. And that room is very dimly lit. You can barely make out that there's an apple on that table. My intuition works like this. I see barely through the dimmest of light what I think might be an apple sitting on the table. My intuitive knowing, that knowing that's been with you all along. I don't know how I know, but I know. When your intuitive knowing then will speak up and say, hey, Bo, that's an apple. And the minute it says that's an apple, I can see it come into form and I go, yep, that is an apple. That is for sure an apple. When you're looking at just in your day-to-day human life and you're looking at a picture that's kind of odd, and you can't figure it out, and somebody walks up to you and it says, oh, that's the back of a dog's head. The second they say that, you go, oh, I can see that now. That's a little bit on how intuition works. Your knowing fills in the blanks. It brings the strength of the vision to clarity. The knowing is the core of all 5 of your senses. So quick review, your 6th sense, your intuition, your intuitive channel goes through your other 5 senses. So even when you know, but you don't know how you know, you did see, feel, hear, taste, or smell something. Your 5 senses, one of them was working overtime, trying to get your attention, but we're not used to using them. So here we are. Then we expect, because we haven't seen anything intuitively before. And then we're expecting it to come through super clear, like bright lights in the room, green, shiny, like little glisten on the edge of the apple. You think it's going to look like that. So you're waiting for that. And your expectation is there. So you don't see it how your intuition is wired. If I purposely use my imagination to remember a memory of something, it is that vague as well. I barely see it, but I know what happened. So then I kind of know what I'm looking at. That is how intuition works. That's the bar I want you to drop. Okay. Talking about seeing, we're also going to talk about, I talked about like what it is to see spirit, how it's not, solid. I want to interject this one though. I'm going to interject a little story because this is kind of one of those quirky little weird stories for intuitives. There's going to be exceptions. When I opened up initially, this isn't the story, but you might have already heard my story on how I opened up. I was a skeptic until I was 32. And then my grandmother showed up in spirit form in my living room. She was 70% solid that day. And it was almost impactful. Like she had to be that clear to see in my living room, eyes open, because that's what triggered me to step into this path. And now I get to hang out with you. So, but other than that, maybe 2 or 3 times I've seen somebody solid. And even then you might have seen spirits in complete solid form and you didn't know because they didn't do something to let you know that. So here's my story. I went to a drugstore once to go pick up some stuff and like shampoo, just stuff like that. It was in a strip mall. So there was just one face building. So one in, one out, only one door. It was a very small store. And I went in there, I was all by myself. I went in, I'm looking through the shelves, picking out the things I need. And a guy comes around the back side of one of the aisles, of my aisle that I'm in. And he's solid. I mean, this is the spirit I'm talking about. But at the time, he was 100% solid. You know what else he was? Creepy as hell. He looked at me. You know that look, ladies. That's where, yep, looks like I'm prey. Okay. Great. So I was thoroughly creeped out. He had a look on his face. I'm like, I'm out. I grabbed a couple more things and I walked up to the cash register. Now, there's only one cash register. It blocks the entrance. So you have to go through the cash register and then around the cash register to get out of the store. And I'm thinking to myself, this is good. I've already checked out. He never left. I'm going to make a beeline to my car and go on to my next errand. So I get all my stuff. Thank you very much. Walk out the front door. Again, he hasn't left the building, so I'm still good. I'm going to go get in my car. I walk out the front door, and to my right is a park bench parked right in front of the store, and he's sitting on it. That messed with my head. And I had a human moment of, how'd you do that? And then I had an intuitive moment of, wait a minute, you're not alive. And the second I thought that, he disappeared, like in front of me, just 1 second there, the next millisecond, not. I don't know. I might have shrieked. I don't know. All I know is I got in my car, shook it off, and went on my day. I know I'm a medium. I know I communicate with the deceased. But you know the difference between somebody in spirit form, translucent spirit form, and somebody in solid form? I'm safe with the deceased because I know they're not going to hurt me. So that was my translation. But that story is an example of how these things can happen in extremes. You can see something 100% solid. You can hear something as if it's a person standing right next to you externally. Now, there are mediums and psychics who can see that clearly all the time. That would be a struggle beyond a struggle. But I'll tell you, there's like 2% of them. Super small percentage. And they adapt and they get used to it. For the rest of us, it's kind of a sliding scale. We either see very vaguely, which I do, or you see, very strongly or in a different way that's so unique that you know it's coming through. There's all the variations. Now, when it comes to hearing something intuitively, the knowing is a very strong part of hearing. Hearing's a little bit more difficult. Again, the exceptions are there where you can hear something as if it's outside of yourself. And there are very small percentage of intuitives that do hear as if it's outside of themselves. But the majority of intuitives, the majority of people, because we're all intuitive, who hear intuitive messages, hear them within themselves. Like you're hearing yourself talking, saying something to yourself. And there's levels of that as well. Some people hear in a different voice. They might hear a male voice. Maybe they hear a male voice with a specific accent. That's probably the easiest way to hear. But others will hear in their own voice. And if that's you, I'm sorry. I know that's a tough one. That's how I hear too. And it took me a long time to really trust and develop that. How do I know if it's me or not? This is where we have to train and hone and practice distinguishing between intuition and imagination. Because the minute you distinguish between those two, that's where your accuracy goes up. Now, sometimes people will hear in just a muffled voice where you can't even make it out. And then you say, well, Bo, how do they know what they said? Because the knowing comes in. The knowing comes in and fills in the gaps. The knowing comes in and says, what you're hearing is coming from this particular person or this particular guide, and this is what they're saying. That is hearing. So if you're waiting to hear something as loud as you hear me speaking to you now, please drop that bar. Okay, let's get to feeling. When it comes to feeling, because we're talking about the five senses, I'm going to skip over taste and smell because they're like, you know, yeah, they're at the kids' table. They're not at the kids' table. That was a bad joke. They are less frequent. And if they happen, you're going to know they happen. If you're tasting chocolate chip cookies and there's not one in your mouth, you're going to know it. So they're a little odd that way. They're kind of the odd ones out. They're the cool kids over in the corner. Now, the third one though, the feeling, since we're talking about the five senses, which is what the intuition, which your intuitive channel runs through. If we're talking about feeling, we're talking about physical feeling, not emotions. That's a different day. We'll make a different episode on that. But we're talking about physical feelings. So small percentage, exceptions, somebody feels something just as strong as if it would have happened to them. Small exceptions. Majority of the time, just like all these other senses, you're going to feel something vaguely or know that you're feeling something. So let's say somebody comes to you and you're reading them and all of a sudden your ankle starts to have like a tingle to it. That would be the vaguest way it comes through, or it feels warm. Maybe there's a little bit of a spike of like a little shoot of pain, but it's kind of dull. That's going to tell you something happened to their ankle. And that's the intuitive message coming through. I'm getting a message that something happened to your ankle. And what will happen is what comes in to fill in the blanks, your knowing. Your knowing supports the feeling by telling you it's not a tingle. They broke it. This is not a tingle. It's a painful thing. But you're not going to feel the level of pain that they felt. It's going to be an alert. All of these things are an alert to say, look at this, hear this, feel this. Now the knowing is going to fill in more information. Another one. Here's another good one, because this one's really common. Anxiety. Anxiety is common, right? So many of us have it. You might get a subtle feeling of anxiety and say that to the person that you're doing the reading for. Or that might be the message for yourself too, if you decide to go in a certain direction. But the end result is that the person you're reading actually has full-blown anxiety attacks. But your intuition isn't going to give you a full-blown anxiety attack. It's going to give you enough of a feeling to know this is connected to anxiety. And then what happens? Your knowing comes in. I sound like that teacher on Ferris Bueller. And then your knowing comes in and it fills in the blanks and it says, full-blown anxiety attack. So our five senses keep us focused in on the message, shows it to us. We hear it, we feel it, taste it, smell it, and then our knowing fills it out, completes it. This is the process of paying attention to those five senses. This is the actual development process that I've kind of described sideways when it comes to opening up. You get an inkling of something and it just happens. what I want you to leave here today with is knowing that it's happening. And for many of us, more than one sense is speaking at a time. For many of us, we might feel a little bit of anxiety at the same time we might see an image of somebody having anxiety. Or we might see and hear at the same time. Or because we want to include the kids at the kid table, we might taste and smell something at the same time. But anyway, this is what it is. So what I want for you is I want you to be able to drop the bar, drop the expectations, acknowledge that this is happening. I want you to release into just no expectations whatsoever on how I see, how I hear, and how I feel. Just be like, throwing in the towel. I got it. Take that approach and see if you start to connect into your unique wiring and really start to understand the balance between the sense and the knowing and how those two things work together to deliver the messages for you. Okay. And that's our episode today. I just really want to dive in that a little deeper. So thank you very much for joining me. And I will see you next week.